Welcome to the Whole Health Empowerment Project podcast. This show is for busy mamas like you with the desire for better whole health balance, but you may be feeling overwhelmed and busy and really don't know where to start. Hi, I'm Trisha. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition coach, and I'm here to walk you through the whole health journey so that you can begin to have more fulfillment in who you are meant to be. In this podcast, you'll learn practical tips to get you started, motivation to keep you inspired, and guest interviews that will empower you to take action. Come join me in failing forward, one step at a time, into the journey of health, wellness, and self-care. Welcome to your new project. Hey ladies, welcome back to the show. I am your host, Trisha Stefankowitz, registered dietitian, nutritionist. On our episode today, we are going to continue this topic of mindset. In particular, we're going to talk about the choices or the decisions that we make, the consequence of those decisions, and the clarity, giving you clarity to have a roadmap of the outcome that you want to achieve. I think a lot of times when it comes to health, wellness, and self-care goals, which is what this podcast is about, so oftentimes it's kind of like the emphasis of like, oh, you want it, then just start to do it. But in a lot of, people that I've worked with and myself included, and I think most people, there is nobody really ever talks about this mindset or the stuff that we tell ourselves that is the real thing that decides our success or our failure, not taking any action. And so, although it's not anything like glamorous to talk about, I think it's really important because I think this is the really big thing that hinders us when it comes to getting clarity and taking action when it comes to achieving the goals and moving towards the goals that you want to accomplish. So that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. Before we start the episode, I want to ask you a favor. I love talking about goals on this podcast, and I have a goal too. And my goal is to increase my podcast downloads. The reason for this is that in order to grow and expand this podcast so that we can continue to talk about normalizing what it looks like for real people to get into a place that they feel empowered and taking action towards their health, wellness, and self-care goals, some of that growth and expansion comes with podcast downloads. So previously, I was able to provide 2 podcast episodes a week, which I had to stop this year because it was just too much. And on this podcast, we talk about, having that idea that you're taking care of yourself. As most of you know, I work full time. I am a mom to a little 5-year-old boy, and then doing this podcast as well. It takes a lot of time. And so in the future, I wish to get to a point that I can resume doing 2 podcasts a week, but at this point, I can't do it. But a way that maybe I can start thinking about doing that in the future is increasing downloads. So, doing this podcast, there is no monetary benefit in this for me at all. I do it because I want to just put a more positive message out there about what it really takes to achieve the goals that you want, and not some woo-woo stuff, like to really get into the nitty-gritty, not just like really basic stuff that you can find on the internet, like really dive into it. And so one of the ways that you can help grow this community is by downloading any of the episodes that you love. And you can also subscribe to my email as well. That will tell you when a new podcast episode is coming out, or you can subscribe to the podcast. But what I would say is that the easiest way for me to try to expand this community is by increasing downloads. And so listening to any of the previous episodes or any episodes that you may have missed, or even sharing this podcast with people that you think would benefit from it would be great. And it would help grow this community influence that we have. So I thank you so much for all of the attention and love that I've already been getting. And I hope that we can continue to grow this community. And I need your help to do that. So anything that you can do I would be so grateful for. So thank you in advance. Okay, so today we're going to talk about this idea of every choice that you make or you don't make will have a consequence. The consequence may be something that happens now, or it may be something that happens much later in the future. So, for instance, say you have a goal that you want to take a walk at night because you want to feel better or you want to clear your head. The consequence of not doing that action would be that your head doesn't feel clear and you feel like as scatterbrained as maybe you previously did. The consequences of taking that walk will be that you may be feeling better and maybe your brain feels like it's much calmer, right? So there's an action and there's a consequence depending on whatever action you choose to take. And that's like a short term consequence. One of the longer term consequences could be something related to a disease state. So, as you all probably know, I work in a dialysis center. I am a dietitian there. And so, another choice, behavior, consequence kind of situation that I want to put out there, but it's a longer term consequence, would be somebody who has diabetes. So, perhaps you are somebody who has diabetes. So, the one choice you can make would be to make sure that you test your blood sugar, you control your diabetes, and in the long run, you're able to manage that diabetes at a pretty decent level without a lot of complications. That's a consequence of taking action and doing what it is that you wanted to do, which is probably keeping your diabetes in check. Now, the consequence of not taking action would be having diabetes, having your blood sugar be uncontrolled, and then having a progression into the disease, which is having the longer term consequence of perhaps, like my patients, needing to be on dialysis if you're somebody who is starting dialysis from having uncontrolled diabetes. So, whatever it is that you choose to do, because even not taking action is a choice, there is a consequence. And that's what I want to talk about today. That this idea that if you want a different outcome, then you have to take, then you have to make a different choice than you are making today. And by taking a different choice, it's going to lead you in a different direction than you one that you want today. So if you're somebody who feels like you're taking action and it's moving you towards your goal, then that is great. I want to encourage you to keep doing that. However, I think most people aren't achieving everything that they want to achieve. So there's probably always room for growth and improving your choices and consequences. In my own life, I feel like a lot of times I always have a million things that I'm trying to accomplish, maybe not always outwardly, but happens at the same time. And I notice that sometimes, like, there's parts of my life at this particular time that maybe I'm really good at making choices that are going to take me in that direction. But then there's other times that I'm just not ready to take any action to have a different choice. And by the way, that's okay too. Because all of this and all of this topic is a way that you can become empowered to take action. And you might not be in a place that you can take action right now. And that's okay because you might not be there. There's lots of like we've talked about in previous episode that there's like a stages of change model and when it comes to behavior. And if you're somebody who's not in a place that you're able to make and take action at this particular time, then perhaps you're in a place that you're starting to think about it. And by listening to this episode, that's enough because it's going to just, you're just going to keep getting to a place that the more and more you listen to it, and the more and more empowered you get and less scared you get, then hopefully you'll get to a place that you take action. So, I want to talk about this idea of if you just in general, because I also think that we do these things as humans where we think that we're taking more action than we may actually be doing. And for sure, I'm guilty of this. I will set goals in my head and at the beginning of the month, and then I review them either nightly or the ones that I don't achieve, I usually do monthly because I don't check in with myself and so I don't achieve them. And I'll look at the end of the month and I'll be like, oh gosh, I had this goal. And then at the end of the month, I look and I didn't achieve it. But if I go back and I look at what I did to achieve that goal, most likely I did nothing to get there. And so my inaction led me to not achieve the goal that I want. And so that's what I want to talk about. I think maybe you're someone who's like me thinking that you're doing all of these things when it comes to one of the goals that you have. But when you actually think about it, you're not really doing anything. And so this episode is to kind of give you clarity on that and try to figure out, are you ready to be in a place that you're willing to choose something different in order to get to the consequence or the outcome that you really desire? So, if you're somebody who is wanting to have like a goal of being like calm and that you're meditating more and that you are going to be not yelling at your kids or your parents or whatever it is, or your spouse or your significant other, your partner, well, then you can't choose to be crazy and screaming and having stress and then have the outcome that you desire of a calm house. It requires you to choose a calmness in order to get to the goal of calmness, right? And if you're somebody who chooses to have this life that your outcome is this, it's not really a choice. If your outcome is that you want an increased level of physical fitness, well, then you can't choose inactivity and lying on the couch watching Netflix reruns and then achieve that outcome. And so sometimes there are events when maybe you even though you have a bigger outcome, you're not actually doing the actions on a consistent basis to be able to achieve that outcome that you desire. So let's explore the connections and just kind of this idea of the choices and the consequence and the action that you take today, how it will impact your future and your future consequences, and that you have the power to choose what you want to do today. So, because this is more tactical, I want to kind of really talk about some practical steps when we talk about this and how to get started. Well, I think one of the most important things is to know the outcome of what you want to achieve and then focus on this instead of the action. I think sometimes when we don't know what it is we want to achieve and we're just taking action, it's really hard to see the bigger picture of what the goal that you want. So once you're able to figure out what your outcome is, so what is your outcome today? If you're somebody who wants to be, like we used in the previous example, more physically fit, well, then once you're able to figure out what the outcome is, then you can start to go back and figure out what action you need to do to get to that place. Do you need to go back and look at your calendar for the week and figure out where you can put some physical activity in there? Because doing some kind of physical activity, that's the behavior and that's the choice that you're making, is going to get you to the goal or your outcome of having increased physical fitness, right? And so it's trying to kind of figure out what it is you want to achieve so that you can start to backpedal and figure out what you need to do on a consistent basis to achieve the goal that you want. Once you know where you want to go, then you can start looking backwards and figure out how you're going to achieve it. So once you know the outcome, it gives you the roadmap of what and how you can achieve the goal that you desire. Because then you can start to ask yourself questions like, every day you can say, okay, is the choice that I'm making today going to get me closer to my goal or further away from my goal? And we'll talk about this in the next step, but it's just this idea that you're able to see the bigger picture in what it is that you're trying and that you desire to have. And then I think also, once you know the outcome, you can start to figure out the level of discomfort that you are willing to have in order to get to the goal that you achieve. Because you are going to have some kind of discomfort, but I think it's having this idea of knowing what that is and having just anticipating it that it's going to happen will allow you to achieve the goal that you desire. Because you may not actually want to take the action, but you need to see the bigger picture of what you want. And so, if you want to be more physically active, then you cannot lie on the couch every day and expect to become an athlete. And you can't expect to become physically stronger. And then you can't complain about that you're still at that same level of inactivity, because when you look back, you can see that you did no action to get you to the outcome that you desire. It could be the same as you want to lose weight. That is the one that I hear all the time, or that you want to feel better. Well, then once you know that that is your outcome, then you can start to figure out what you're going to do. And I would probably say I would look at it on a weekly basis of what you can do that week to get to the goal that you want. I would even say your outcome is the bigger goal and then breaking it down into these smaller steps each week and what you need to do that week. That over time, you can go back and revisit what you did each week and each month and see if the behavior was something that mimicked the outcome that you want. And so that's why it's important to know what the outcome is, because then you can start to break down the behaviors that you need to do and look at what it is that you're willing to sacrifice for that particular week, and to really get into a place that you can start to, see if you're doing and you're willing to take that temporary discomfort to be able to achieve the outcome that you desire. So for you today, I want you to start thinking about what it is as the first step before we move into the second step, to see what it is, the outcome, and then go back and look at what you can do this week. And it doesn't have to be that you're doing something every day this week. It would just be that if we're going on this physical activity example, what can it do? What can you do this week that will help you get closer to your goal? So if you're already exercising 15, walking 15 minutes a day, okay, revisit that. Is that enough to get you to the goal that you want to achieve or not? And if it's that it isn't, then trying to adjust and figure out what it will do to take you there. If you're somebody who's not doing anything at all, start to think about, like, is this a goal that you really want? Is this an outcome that you really want? And then what action can you do? Can you take any action this week to get you towards your goal? And again, it doesn't have to be every day. It's just being intentional about your week. Do you have 2 or 3 days to spare that you can do something that will take you to your goal? So that's the first thing, talking about what it is, the outcome that you want to achieve, and then going back this week to figure out what action steps you need to take in order to get you closer, or at least to put you on the pathway that if you're doing it, the action consistently, you will achieve the outcome that you desire. There's like these kids, there's like these cards that they use for kids, and it's like, like, what do you think will happen if you choose to eat junk food? And then you have to like figure out what the consequence is and you match them up. And so this is what I'm thinking about when I'm doing this episode. But also I created like a worksheet that will kind of do the same thing for you. It is on my email list. I'll send it out this week when this podcast episode airs. So you can look for, if you're interested in doing the choice consequence worksheet that I developed, then you can go into the show notes of this podcast episode. Or if you're somebody who's already on my email list, you will get it this week, probably either Thursday or Friday. And if you're not on my email list, certainly you can join. You can go to triciard.com and sign up for my freebie, and then you will be on my email list and you will get this as well. So the second thing that I wanted to, like the second tactical thing to start to really have you start thinking about your choices and your consequence, would be really having this idea of owning what your choice is versus the consequence of that. So the choice here is the behavior. So what is the behavior that you're doing? That is your choice. Because no matter what, either taking action or not taking action is a choice. So action is a choice with a consequence, and inaction is a choice with a consequence. And so the good news is here is that you get to make the choice, and you have the power here. You have the power to make the choice today, make the decision to do something that you want, or you have the choice to not do something and then to be further away from what it is you want to achieve. But the power here is that you get to decide. You get to decide if you want to do something or if you don't want to do something. Nobody can do that for you. So remember, the choice is the behavior that you're doing, and the consequence is the outcome of that behavior. So if you are somebody who is lying on the couch, that is the choice that you're doing. And then the consequence is that perhaps you're not going to be able to achieve that level of physical fitness that you are so badly wanting to do. So, again, you can go back and look at the worksheet that I have because what that's going to do is help provide awareness into what you want, what you are willing to do and not willing to do. And it will help you create accountability. And so, anytime when you're thinking of what your choice is and what your consequences, again, this is meant to empower you to either be okay with whatever decision you're making. If you decide that you don't, if you're not ready for that goal, then that's a way that you're making a decision. And if you want to do something else, then that's a decision too. So it creates this awareness in what you want, what the outcome is, what you were willing to do to get it. So, like, what are the choices that you're making each week to get there? And then creating accountability for getting to that goal. So it will create a roadmap and it will also create accountability because I would say that then you can go back at the end of the week or the end of the month or, just kind of looking back and trying to figure out, like, okay, I didn't do any of the things I wanted to get to my goal, or I did. And that just helps because I feel like a lot of times for anybody who writes down what they eat, so I like to write down what I eat. I've made the mistake many times to calorie count, but I don't really believe in that. I'm trying to go on hunger and fullness cues. But the thing is it's really helpful to write down what I eat because if my goal is that I want to eat so many fruits and veggies today, or if I'm thinking about emotional eating and I'm looking at that, it's helpful to be able to, even though I have that goal that I want to achieve, more fruits and veggies, decrease emotional eating. If I were to really go back and look at that, I can really see what it is I'm doing to achieve the goals, right? Because sometimes I can look back and like I'm doing everything I said I'm going to do. And then by writing it down, I can really go back and be like, oh, I didn't really do any of the things I thought I was doing. And so when you're talking about choices and consequences, and when you're talking about what your outcome is and what you're going to do weekly, I would also say to write it down and write down like what effect will this have on you today if you're doing what it is you want to do. So if you are, exercising today or if you have a game plan in your head, thinking of when you're writing down for the week, like how many times you're going to exercise this week, writing down which days you're going to do it. I have an episode on SMART goals and I'll put that in the show notes too. But kind of like writing it down and then figuring out what days you're actually going to do the behavior and then writing down too what effect will this have on you today, or even thinking about like what effect will it have if I just lay on the couch all day? Am I going to get closer to my goal, further away? Just so that you have this question in your mind so that you can start to really think about that you whatever choice you make, it's yours. You get to decide your life, you get to make the choices for your life, but knowing that it will have a consequence and starting to think like, if I'm laying on the couch watching Netflix all day today, then what's the consequence of that? And again, it may not even have a direct consequence today, but then knowing that if physical activity is your goal, then maybe the next day you got to do a little bit more than you're doing today. So it just kind of helps you in that decision making process about what you do to get to what you want to achieve. And then last, I would say, really starting to think about, are you achieving the behavior that you want and the outcome that you want? And what is getting in the way? And so I think that's also a good reason why you're writing down choices and consequences and why you're writing down what you want to achieve this week and writing down if you did or did not do them. Because what that's going to show you, it's going to give you clarity on what is getting in the way and what are some of the barriers. When I have clients that I'm talking to, sometimes like we so don't even know what gets in our way. We haven't quite gotten to that point to see what it is until we really talk about it. And most times we're in our head and nobody's saying to you, like, hey, did you exercise today? Hey, did you eat your 5 fruits and veggies today? Nobody's asking us that. And so because we're not like having those discussions, it's probably in our head a little bit more. But getting it out, whether it's writing it down or having what you want to achieve this week and revisiting it, it's going to be this easier way that you can start to figure out what got in the way. So when you start to think like, oh, I wanted to eat my 4 or 5 fruits and veggies this week, but I didn't do it. Then you can start to like think about how your week was and you can figure out what got in the way. Oh, okay, I didn't eat any veggies for lunch. Oh, I went out to eat that day. Maybe I could have done this a little bit different. So it just gives you like some ideas so that you can change that behavior as you progress towards your goal to kind of be more consistent with whatever it is you're trying to achieve. And then it will also help you kind of decide like what you could do the next time around, like any of the barriers, and of trying to figure out what a solution would be for you to get closer to your goal. So, in this, I just want to kind of remember for you to know that like any behavior that you choose is going to have a consequence of that behavior. And so if your outcome or your goal is to have food ready and prepared for the week, then maybe the behavior that you have to choose is to meal prep for this week. If you want to be a little bit stronger or manage your stress and your goal was to maybe work out the action that you could take would be to go for a walk a couple of days a week. Well, then that behavior is going to be closer to getting you to the goal that you want to do than if you don't do anything at all. So, remembering that in all of this, as we wrap up, that you want to start to think about the choices that you make each day and if that choices bring you closer or further away from the goal that you want to achieve. And so, just to recap, the first thing is kind of talking about this idea of what is the outcome that you want to achieve and what level of action do you have to do? What do you have to do this week in order to get there? And that could even, I would suggest looking at your calendar and figuring out ways or thinking of plans that you have to make. Or if your goal is more self care, scheduling in your calendar when it is that you're going to take care of yourself, scheduling anything that you want to do in terms of action so that it's right there and you already know as you go into the day which day you're going to do that action and what it looks like, just planning it out ahead of time because if you don't think about it ahead of time, it's not going to happen. If you fail to plan, then you don't I forget what the quote is, but it's like if you fail to plan, then you don't stick with the plan, and that's 100% what it is. Like if you don't plan it out that you're going to make these actions happen, then most likely you're not going to have it happen. The second thing would be just to kind of start thinking about the choices that you're making, the behavior that you're doing, the action that you're taking, and the effect or the consequence or the outcome of either doing that behavior or not doing that behavior. And again, I have a worksheet available. You can check in the show notes so that you can really break down what choice you're making today. And then is that choice taking you further from your goal or closer to your goal? And then the third question here is trying to figure out, are you achieving the desired goals that you want to do? Are you choosing behaviors that are going to take you closer to the consequences of the behavior that you desire? And really reflecting on and going back and seeing what got in the way, trying to figure out what the barriers are and what you could do differently. Because these three steps in combination are going to allow you to gain clarity and focus and kind of give you a little bit more of a roadmap of what you need to do as you reflect on them to getting to where you want to do. And then also just kind of thinking about like, if you continue to do these behaviors, whatever they are, what does it look like in the future to you? What, what is the consequence of that? Is the consequence something that happened short term? Is the consequence something that happens as a longer term consequence? And then trying to revisit any of the obstacles that got in the way, any of the barriers, and then trying to figure out if there's anything that you could do differently this week or the next week. As always, end the episode with this idea that there's progress over perfection. So, in setting choices and consequences and having clarity around that, it's not to judge it. It's just so that you can be honest with yourself about what it is that you're trying to achieve. Because if you really want something, then you have to take steps to make that happen. I think a lot of us, myself included, get in this fear mode and this idea that either we're too scared to take action because that's scary, or this idea that we think we're doing so much more than we actually are. And so if we can really start to think about what the outcome is and start to link that with any of the behaviors that we're doing in the week, we can see if that behavior is enough to get us to the goal, if we need to increase the frequency of the behavior to get us to the goal, or we can look and see that maybe we're not doing anything that we thought that we were to get to the goal that you have. And knowing that whether you choose action or whether you choose to not take action, that is a choice, and that is a choice that is completely up to you. But emphasizing here that any action that you take that's going to get you, any action that you take is going to either take you further from your goal or closer to your goal. And so just trying to revisit that if you are able to take action today, that action is going to take you to the goal and the outcome that you desire. So no matter how small that action feels, if you're able to do it more consistently and not worry about being perfect about it, and to do it as many days a week as you need to do it, it's going to get you to the outcome or the goal that you desire and that you wish to achieve. So I thank you for listening. I will see you guys back here next week, and have a good week. If you found value in this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes. Being a busy woman or mom doesn't mean that we have to give up on our health, wellness, or self-care. Together, we can take tiny, imperfect steps towards creating the whole health we desire and deserve. You can find us at wholehealthempower.com or on Instagram at wholehealthempower. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.